How the chosen shows us our true struggles to keep us into faith. Faith is never truly tested in moments of peace. It is in the silence after our prayers seem unanswered, in the weight of our doubts and in the chaos of life's storms that we begin to wonder, is God still with me? It's easy to trust when life is smooth, when the path is clear, and when every door seems to open effortlessly. But what happens when those doors slam shut? What happens when the storm doesn't pass, when the healing doesn't come, when the breakthrough we longed for seems impossibly out of reach? That is where real faith begins. That is where the battle takes place. The chosen doesn't just tell the story of Jesus, it exposes the raw, unfiltered struggles of those who followed him, making one thing painfully clear. Faith is not the absence of struggle, but the endurance through it. We tend to romanticize the disciples, imagining them as men of unwavering belief, but the truth is, they wrestled with the same fears, doubts, and failures that we do. They stood before Jesus himself, witnessed his miracles, heard his words with their own ears, and still their faith faltered. What does that say about us? Look at Peter. Bold, passionate, always the first to speak, the first to act, the first to believe, but also the first to sink when the waters rose around him. The moment he stepped out of the boat, his eyes locked on Jesus, faith carried him. But as soon as he noticed the wind, the waves, the reality of his situation, he crumbled. How many times have we done the same? Started strong, full of confidence that God is with us, only to be consumed by fear the moment things don't go as planned. Then there's Mary Magdalene. Her story is one of redemption, of rescue from the depths of darkness. But even she wasn't immune to the weight of her past. She had been freed, yet still she faltered. The grip of old fears, the whispers of shame, the lies that told her she wasn't worthy, it all pulled her back. How many believers have felt that same struggle, saved by grace, yet still haunted by mistakes that refuse to let go? Matthew, the outcast, rejected by his own people, isolated in his success, longing for something more but unsure if he was truly worthy of belonging. We see him follow Jesus, leaving behind the life he built, yet still struggling with the weight of who he once was. How often do we feel like outsiders in our own faith, questioning whether we truly fit into the life God has called us to? And then there's Thomas, doubting Thomas. But was it really doubt, or was it simply fear? The fear of being wrong, the fear of getting his hopes up only to be disappointed, the fear of believing in something too good to be true. Haven't we all been there? Faced with a choice between faith and logic, knowing what we should believe, but still feeling the need for proof, for something tangible to hold on to. Jesus didn't choose perfect men. He didn't gather scholars or the righteous or those who had it all figured out. He chose the broken, the stubborn, the fearful. Why? Because faith is not about perfection. It is about persistence. It is about standing when everything inside you wants to fall. It is about holding on when it would be easier to let go. But here's the truth no one wants to hear. Faith will always be a battle. You will have nights when your prayers feel empty, days when you question your purpose, and seasons where God seems distant. And that's exactly what the enemy wants. He doesn't need to destroy your faith. He just needs to make you believe that your struggle is a sign of failure. But what if it's the opposite? What if your struggles are not signs of weakness, but proof that you are on the right path? The chosen forces us to confront this reality, to see our own struggles reflected in the eyes of those who walked beside Jesus. It strips away the illusion that faith is easy, that belief comes without cost. It reminds us that even those who stood in his presence wrestled with doubt, fear, and failure. And yet, Jesus never turned them away. If he didn't give up on them, why would he give up on you? If he saw Peter sink and still called him the rock on which he would build his church, if he saw Mary fall back into darkness and still welcomed her home, if he saw Matthew's isolation and still invited him into his inner circle, what makes you think he would abandon you in your struggle? This is the battle of faith, the war between trust and fear, between belief and doubt. The question is not whether you will struggle, you will. The question is, will you keep going? Will you keep walking even when the path is unclear? Will you hold on to Jesus even when you don't understand? Because that is what separates those who fall away from those who grow stronger. And if the chosen has shown us anything, it's that the ones who struggle the most often become the ones who are used the greatest. So maybe, just maybe, your greatest battle is not a sign that God has abandoned you. Maybe it's proof that He is preparing you for something greater than you could ever imagine. Why we see ourselves in the Chosen's characters. There is a reason the Chosen feels different from any other portrayal of Jesus and His disciples. It is not just another retelling of biblical events. It is an invitation to see ourselves in the story. These aren't distant figures from the past, untouchable and unreal. They are living, breathing reflections of us, our struggles, our doubts, our weaknesses, our hopes. Every time we watch them wrestle with faith, we recognize our own battles. Every time they fall, we see the moments we have fallen. And every time Jesus reaches out to them, we are reminded that He is still reaching out to us. Peter, the bold one, the passionate one, the man who speaks before he thinks, who acts before he processes, who charges forward believing he understands God's plan, only to realize he has misunderstood it completely. How many times have we done the same? How many times have we prayed for direction, felt a surge of confidence, and stepped out in faith only to find ourselves sinking the moment the waves rise? Peter's journey is not about perfection, it is about learning to trust, even after failure. Mary Magdalene, her story is one of redemption, of being rescued from the darkness, of being given a new life. And yet, even after encountering Jesus, she struggles. Her past still whispers, her old wounds still ache, the shame still clings. She falls. And in her fall, we see ourselves, the times we thought we had moved past something only to find it creeping back in. The moments we wondered if we had disappointed God too much, if we had failed Him beyond repair. But Mary's story is not one of condemnation. It is one of restoration. She fell and yet He called her back, and that is the promise for every one of us. Matthew, the outcast, the tax collector, the man who had wealth but no belonging, success but no love, rejected by his own people, seen as a traitor, despised, unwanted. When he follows Jesus, he leaves everything behind, but that does not mean he stops struggling. He longs to belong, yet the other disciples still see him as an outsider. He wants to prove himself, to earn his place, but faith is not about proving. How many of us carry that same wound? The need to be accepted, to be seen, to feel like we truly belong. And yet, in Jesus, Matthew finds something he has never known: unconditional love. Thomas, the skeptic, the logical one, the man who questions not because he wants to disbelieve, but because he is afraid to believe in something too good to be true. Doubt does not make him a rebel. It makes him human. How often have we stood in the same place, wanting so desperately to believe, but holding back because of fear, because we have been hurt before, because we do not want to be let down, because faith requires surrender, and surrender is terrifying. Thomas is proof that questioning does not disqualify us from faith. It is part of the journey. James and John, the ambitious ones, the ones who want to sit at Jesus' right and left in his kingdom, the ones who see faith as a path to greatness before they understand the cost of true discipleship. How many times have we followed Jesus expecting ease, favor, and recognition, only to realize that faith is not about status but sacrifice? Each disciple carries a story, a weakness, a wound, a struggle, and each of them reflects a part of us. We see ourselves in their fears, in their failures, in their desperate need for Jesus to be patient with them. And He is. Over and over again, He meets them where they are. He does not demand immediate perfection. He does not push them away when they fail. He simply calls them to keep following. This is why The Chosen connects so deeply, because it strips away the illusion that faith is for the perfect. It reminds us that those who walked closest to Jesus were not the strongest, not the wisest, not the most qualified. They were ordinary people, just like us, struggling, doubting, failing, and still called, still loved, still used by God in ways they never imagined. And if Jesus could take a group of flawed, broken individuals and turn them into the foundation of His church, what does that mean for us? If He could look at Peter, who denied Him, and still say, "On this rock I will build my church." If He could look at Mary, who fell back into darkness, and still welcome her with open arms. If He could take Matthew, who had been rejected by everyone, and make him a part of His inner circle, then there is no struggle, no failure, no doubt that can separate us from His purpose. So the question is not whether we will struggle with faith. We will. The real question is, will we keep following even when we do? Faith in crisis is when believing becomes the hardest choice. Faith is easy when the road is clear, when prayers are answered, when life flows in the direction we hoped for. But what happens when everything falls apart? When suffering arrives unannounced, when the silence of God feels deafening? That is when faith is no longer just a word, but a choice. And it is in that moment, when believing seems impossible, that faith is tested in its purest form. The Chosen does not shy away from this reality. It does not paint faith as something effortless, nor does it suggest that following Jesus eliminates struggle. Instead, it shows something far more real, the battle of faith in the face of crisis. When the disciples face uncertainty, when their trust is shaken, when their world crumbles, we see our own lives reflected in their eyes. And just like them, we are left with the same question. Will I still believe when everything in me wants to run? Peter walked on water, but the moment he saw the wind, fear overtook him. 1 second, he was experiencing a miracle. The next, he was drowning. And isn't that how faith often feels? One moment we are standing in confidence, believing God is with us. The next we are overwhelmed by the reality of our circumstances, gasping for air, crying out, "Lord, save me." The crisis was not the storm. The crisis was his doubt. And yet Jesus reached out and pulled him up. Not because Peter's faith was strong, but because Peter was willing to call out for help. Then there's Mary Magdalene. After being freed from demonic oppression, she found healing, found purpose, found a home among Jesus and His followers. But the past is cruel, and old wounds do not always heal as quickly as we hope. The weight of shame, the pull of familiar darkness, it all came rushing back, and she stumbled. She fell back into the very thing Jesus had delivered her from. And in that moment, she could have given up. She could have believed the lie that she was too broken to be redeemed again. But Jesus never left her. He never turned away. He welcomed her back, proving that one failure does not undo His grace. Thomas, always questioning, always overthinking, never quite certain. His crisis of faith was different. It wasn't a moment of obvious failure, but a slow, nagging doubt that crept in like a shadow. He wanted to believe. He wanted to trust, but logic demanded answers, proof, certainty. And in his waiting, in his hesitancy, he almost missed the miracle. But Jesus did not rebuke him. He did not cast him aside. Instead, He met him where he was, showing his scars, proving that faith is not about never questioning. It is about choosing to believe even when the questions remain. Faith is not the absence of fear. It is not the rejection of doubt. It is the choice to hold on when fear tells you to let go. It is trusting when logic says there is no reason to. It is standing in the middle of the storm and saying, even here, even now, I will believe. And that is what The Chosen reveals so powerfully. It strips away the illusion that faith should always feel strong, that belief should come easily. It shows us that even those who walked with Jesus, who saw him with their own eyes, still wrestled with uncertainty. And if they struggled, why wouldn't we? But here's what changes everything. The crisis of faith is not the end of faith. It is where it begins. Because real faith is not built in comfort. It is forged in the fire, in the moments where we have every reason to walk away, but choose to stay. So the real question is not whether we will struggle, but what we will do when that struggle comes. Will we let it consume us, or will we press forward, believing that even when we cannot see him, he is still with us? Because if there's one truth that The Chosen teaches us, it's this. Faith is not about never falling. It's about always getting back up. The hidden spiritual lessons in the disciples' weaknesses. Faith is not built on strength alone. In fact, some of the greatest lessons God teaches us come not through victory, but through failure. The disciples of Jesus were not chosen because they were flawless, wise, or unwavering. They were chosen because their weaknesses would reveal something greater, the power of grace. And The Chosen captures this beautifully, showing us that every flaw, every doubt, and every struggle serves a purpose in the hands of God. Peter's greatest weakness was his impulsiveness. He spoke before he thought, acted before he understood, and made promises he could not keep. When Jesus told the disciples that they would all fall away, Peter stood up, full of confidence, declaring, "Even if all fall away, I will not." And yet, the moment fear pressed against him, the moment he was questioned in the courtyard, he denied even knowing Jesus. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. His weakness was exposed, his pride was shattered. And yet, in that breaking, Jesus built something stronger, because it was not Peter's boldness that made him a rock, it was his brokenness. It was the moment he realized he could not rely on his own strength, that he needed Jesus more than he had ever understood before. Mary Magdalene's weakness was her past. Even after she had been set free, even after she had walked with Jesus, there were still moments where the weight of who she used to be threatened to pull her back. She relapsed into fear, into doubt, into shame. She ran away, believing she had failed too deeply to be restored. But Jesus did not abandon her. He did not see her as unworthy. He called her by name, welcomed her back, and proved that redemption is not a one-time event. It is a continual invitation. Her weakness was not the end of her story. It was the very thing that kept her running back to Jesus. Matthew's weakness was his isolation. His past as a tax collector made him an outcast among his own people, and even among the disciples. He often felt like he did not belong. He was not a fisherman, not a tradesman, not a man with rough hands and a common background. He was different, and that difference became a source of struggle. But what Matthew saw as a weakness, Jesus saw as purpose. His ability to see things differently, to observe, to record, to analyze, all of it would be used for something greater, because the man who felt like an outsider would one day write the gospel that would bring countless people into the kingdom. Thomas struggled with doubt. He was the one who always needed more evidence, more clarity, more certainty. He wanted to believe, but belief did not come easily to him, and because of that we call him Doubting Thomas. But what if his doubt was not a failure? What if it was the very thing that made his faith even more powerful? Because when Jesus appeared to him, he did not condemn Thomas for questioning. He met him where he was. He invited him to see, to touch, to believe. And Thomas, the one who had doubted, was also the one who declared with absolute certainty, "My Lord and my God." James and John struggled with ambition. They wanted greatness. They wanted to be at Jesus' right and left when he established his kingdom. They wanted power, recognition, status. And yet, Jesus did not rebuke them for their desire. He reshaped it. He taught them that true greatness is not about being first, but about serving, not about ruling, but about sacrificing. And because of that lesson, these same men who once sought their own glory would later lay down their lives for the gospel. The lesson. The Chosen teaches us through these weaknesses is simple but profound. What we see as flaws, God sees as opportunities. What we believe disqualifies us is often the very thing he will use to display his grace. Because God does not call the qualified, he qualifies the called. And the very thing that makes you feel unworthy may be the exact place where God is preparing to show his greatest work in your life. So the next time you feel like you are too weak, too flawed, too broken to be used by God, remember this: he never needed perfection. He never asked for people who had it all together. He simply asked for people who were willing to follow him, even when they stumbled. Because it is in our weakness that his strength is made perfect. Jesus' radical approach to strengthening the weak. Jesus never chose the strongest, the most influential, or the most respected to be his disciples. He did not seek out religious scholars, political leaders, or those who had their lives perfectly together. Instead, he called fishermen, tax collectors, and outcasts, people society had already dismissed. Why? Because his way of transforming the world was not through power, but through grace. And The Chosen reveals this radical truth in a way that forces us to confront something uncomfortable. Jesus is far more patient with our weaknesses than we are. The world tells us that strength is found in power, in control, in proving ourselves. But Jesus showed that true strength is found in surrender. And so, he gathered a group of men who were weak, broken, and deeply flawed, knowing that through them, he would reveal the power of God. Peter was not chosen because he was a natural-born leader. He was chosen because he would learn to lead through failure. His fiery passion often got him into trouble. He spoke when he should have listened. He acted when he should have waited. He was bold, but also reckless. And when the moment of testing came, when standing with Jesus meant risking everything, Peter crumbled. He denied him. He swore he didn't know him. And yet, after his resurrection, Jesus did not discard him. He did not replace him with someone more reliable. Instead, he restored him, asking him 3 times, "Do you love me?" One question for every failure. One moment of healing for every wound of shame. And then he gave Peter a calling. "Feed my sheep, lead my people. Your failure does not define you, my grace does." Then there's Mary Magdalene. If there was ever a person whom the world had written off, it was her. She was a woman with a past, a reputation, a history that should have made her unworthy of walking with the Son of God. But Jesus saw her differently. He didn't just free her, he called her. He gave her dignity when others gave her shame. And when she struggled, when she fell back into darkness, when she ran, Jesus didn't turn away. He pursued her. Because his love is not given to those who deserve it, it is given to those who need it most. Matthew was despised by his own people, a tax collector, a traitor in the eyes of his fellow Jews. He lived in wealth, yet was utterly alone, and when Jesus called him, Matthew left everything behind. But even after following Jesus, the weight of his past never fully left him. The other disciples struggled to accept him. He was different, socially, intellectually, and spiritually, yet Jesus never made him feel out of place. He chose Matthew not in spite of his differences, but because of them. The man who had been rejected would become one of the writers of the gospel. The outcast would be the one to help shape the foundation of the church. Thomas, the one who doubted, was not rejected. James and John, the ones who sought power, were not cast aside. Even Judas, the one who would betray Jesus, was given every opportunity to change, because Jesus does not give up on the weak. He strengthens them. The world disqualifies people for their flaws, but Jesus calls them anyway. He does not look for those who are already strong. He looks for those who will allow him to be their strength. That is what made his ministry so radical, so unlike anything the world had ever seen. It is why religious leaders couldn't understand him. They expected the Messiah to surround himself with warriors, with men of influence, with those who appeared righteous on the outside. But instead, Jesus built his kingdom with people no one else would have chosen. And this truth is as relevant today as it was then, because we are those people. We are the ones who fall, who doubt, who fail. We are the ones who wonder if we are too broken to be used by God. But the chosen reminds us that Jesus did not choose perfect people. He chose those who were willing. So if you feel unqualified, you are exactly where you need to be. Because in the hands of Jesus, weakness is not a limitation. It is the very thing that will reveal his power in your life. The role of pain and uncertainty in spiritual growth. Pain is something we try to avoid at all costs. We pray for blessings, for ease, for answers that come quickly and without struggle. We want God's presence to be marked by comfort, by open doors, by visible signs that he is with us. But what happens when he seems silent? What happens when suffering enters our lives, when prayers go unanswered, when the path forward is unclear? That is where real faith is tested. That is where we either break or grow. The Chosen captures this reality in a way few stories do. It does not shy away from suffering, nor does it offer easy answers. Instead, it shows what the Bible has made clear from the beginning. God does not always remove the pain, but he always works through it. Peter learned this when his confidence was shattered. He had believed that following Jesus meant victory, that the Messiah would bring immediate restoration to Israel, that everything would fall into place. But instead, he faced rejection, confusion, and failure. When Jesus was arrested, when all his expectations of how things should be fell apart, Peter did the one thing he never thought he would. He denied the one he loved most. The pain of that failure was unbearable, and yet, in that pain, something changed in him. He realized that faith is not about never falling. It is about who you run to when you do. And when Jesus restored him, Peter became stronger than ever before. Mary Magdalene learned this when she relapsed into the darkness she thought she had left behind. She had been freed. She had been made new. And yet, the weight of her past still haunted her. The shame still whispered. And for a moment, she believed the lie that she was not truly changed, that she was not worthy, that she had failed too much to be redeemed again. But Jesus never let her stay in that place. He called her back. And through that experience, she understood something deeper. Grace is not a one-time event. It is an invitation that never ends. Matthew faced uncertainty every day after leaving his tax booth. He had been sure of one thing: his job, his wealth, his status. But the moment he walked away from it all to follow Jesus, nothing was certain. Would the other disciples accept him? Was he really meant to be here? Would he ever truly belong? There were no immediate answers, no clear path ahead. But through that uncertainty, Matthew discovered something greater than comfort. He discovered trust. Thomas struggled with the unknown. His mind demanded clarity, answers, facts. But Jesus rarely gave him those things in the way he wanted. Instead, Jesus asked him to believe before seeing, to trust before understanding. And when Thomas finally did, his faith became unshakable. The one who doubted would one day take the gospel to distant lands, facing persecution and even death with unwavering conviction. The greatest spiritual growth in the chosen happens not in moments of ease, but in moments of pain and uncertainty. And that is exactly how it works in our lives as well. If faith were only about seeing, about always knowing the next step, then it would not be faith at all. Faith is forged in the fire. It is built in the waiting. It grows strongest in the seasons when God feels far away, when we are tempted to turn back, when everything in us wants to give up. But we choose to believe anyway. Jesus never promised a life without suffering. He never said that following him would mean a smooth, effortless path. What he promised was something greater. He promised that we would never walk alone. He promised that every moment of pain, every doubt, every unanswered prayer would not be wasted. That in our breaking, he would build something new. That through our struggles, he would shape us into who we were always meant to be. So if you are in a season of pain, if uncertainty is weighing on your heart, if you feel like you are walking through the fire with no way out, do not believe the lie that God has abandoned you. Your struggle is not proof of his absence. It is proof that he is working, that he is refining you, that something deeper is being formed within you. And when you look back, you will see what Peter saw, what Mary saw, what Matthew and Thomas saw, that the hardest moments were never meant to destroy you. They were meant to transform you. The emotional weight of doubt and how it draws us closer to God. Doubt is often seen as the enemy of faith, something to be avoided, feared, or suppressed. We tell ourselves that if we were stronger, if we truly trusted God, we wouldn't question him. But The Chosen challenges this idea, showing us that doubt is not the opposite of faith. It is often the very thing that deepens it. The emotional weight of uncertainty, of not knowing, of feeling lost, is something every believer experiences. And instead of pushing us away from God, it is often the thing that brings us closer to him. Peter doubted when he stepped onto the water. He had enough faith to climb out of the boat, enough belief to start walking, but the moment he saw the storm around him, fear crept in. His doubt wasn't because he didn't love Jesus. It wasn't because he wasn't committed. It was because he was human. He saw the impossible happening beneath his feet, and his mind couldn't comprehend it. His doubt didn't mean he had failed. It meant he was in the process of learning what faith truly is. And when he started to sink, he did the only thing that mattered. He reached out and Jesus pulled him up. Mary Magdalene doubted her own worth. Even after being redeemed, even after being freed, she still questioned if she truly belonged. The voices of her past told her she was too broken, too far gone. She fell, not because she wanted to, but because doubt whispered that she was not as new as she hoped. But Jesus never let her stay in that place. He came after her. He reminded her that she was not who she used to be. Her doubt didn't separate her from him. It brought her back to him. Matthew doubted whether he would ever belong. He had spent years as an outsider, rejected by his own people. Even among the disciples, he felt different. He was not a fisherman. He was not raised in the same traditions. He was an observer, a recorder, a thinker. Did he truly fit in? Did Jesus really mean to call him? His doubt was not about Jesus. It was about himself. And that is a doubt so many of us carry. We believe in God, but do we believe that he could love us, use us, choose us? And yet, through every moment of uncertainty, Matthew remained. He stayed. He followed. And in the end, he became one of the voices through which the world would hear the gospel. Thomas is the one history remembers most for doubt. But what if we've misunderstood his story? He was not faithless. He was not rebellious. He simply needed to see. And when Jesus finally appeared before him, he did not rebuke Thomas for wanting proof. He invited him closer. He told him to touch his hands, to see for himself. Thomas's doubt didn't drive him away. It led him to one of the most powerful declarations in all of Scripture, "My Lord and my God." Doubt only becomes dangerous when it leads to distance, but in The Chosen, we see something powerful. Every disciple who doubted, who questioned, who struggled, always found Jesus waiting on the other side. Because doubt is not the end of faith. It is often the place where real faith begins. We do not have to pretend we have it all together. We do not have to act as if we never question, never fear, never struggle. Jesus never rejected those who wrestled with doubt. He walked with them, he answered them, he called them anyway. So if you are in a place of doubt, if you feel like your faith is not as strong as it should be, if you are struggling with questions you cannot answer, know this: God is not afraid of your doubt. He is not disappointed in your questions. He is drawing you closer. Because faith is not about never doubting. It is about trusting that even when you don't have all the answers, God is still good, He is still in control, and He is still holding you in His hands. Modern Christianity versus biblical struggle. Are we afraid of hardship? Somewhere along the way, modern Christianity has become uncomfortable with struggle. We have been conditioned to believe that faith should lead to blessings, that following Jesus should result in immediate peace, success, and clarity. We are told that if we just pray enough, believe enough, do enough, God will open every door, remove every obstacle, and make the road smooth before us. But The Chosen reminds us of a reality we often try to avoid. Faith does not eliminate hardship. In fact, it often leads us straight into it. The disciples did not have an easy life. They followed Jesus not into luxury, but into rejection, not into comfort, but into persecution. And they did it not because they were promised earthly rewards, but because they saw something worth giving up everything for. Today, we wrestle with this contrast. We want faith to make life easier, not harder. But the Bible has never promised that. What it has promised is that the struggle is where we are refined, where we are transformed, where we are made into true disciples. Peter wanted a victorious Messiah, a leader who would overthrow Rome and establish a kingdom of power and security. But Jesus did not come to meet human expectations. He came to redefine them. And when Peter realized that following Jesus meant suffering, when he saw his master arrested, humiliated, and crucified, his faith was shaken. He ran. He denied. He wanted an easier road, but the easy road is never where real faith is found. It is in the breaking, in the refining, in the fire, that faith becomes unshakable. James and John thought greatness in the kingdom meant sitting at Jesus' right and left. They imagined a throne, authority, recognition. But Jesus told them something radical. The greatest among you will be a servant. The highest place is the lowest. The way up is down. And they had to decide, would they follow Jesus even when the path led to suffering instead of status? Mary Magdalene's struggle was not about power, but about identity. She had been freed, saved, given a new life. But when the weight of her past pulled her back, when the darkness whispered that she was not truly changed, she had a choice. Would she believe in her redemption even when she didn't feel worthy of it? Or would she let shame convince her she was beyond grace? Her battle was not external, it was internal. And so often, those are the hardest battles of all. Matthew left behind wealth and security for a life of uncertainty. He gave up everything he had built, believing Jesus was leading him to something greater. But what he found instead was resistance. The other disciples struggled to accept him. He was still seen as an outsider. He was not welcomed with open arms. And that's the reality of faith. It does not always bring immediate acceptance. It does not always make life easier. Sometimes it makes things harder before it makes them better. Thomas wanted clarity. He wanted proof. And yet Jesus asked him to believe before seeing, to trust before understanding. This is what faith requires. Not blind optimism, not an easy road, but trust in the middle of the unknown. And that is where modern Christianity struggles. We want answers, we want certainty, we want faith to be simple. But faith is not found in the absence of struggle. It is found in walking forward even when the struggle is overwhelming. The chosen does not present a faith that is convenient. It does not offer a Jesus who guarantees wealth, success, or an easy life. It gives us the real Jesus, the one who calls us to carry our cross, to surrender control, to step into the unknown, not because it is easy, but because it is worth it. We live in a time where Christianity is often presented as a formula for success. But the disciples did not follow Jesus to gain the world. They followed him, knowing it would cost them everything. And that is the real test of faith. Not whether we will trust him when life is good, but whether we will trust him when life is hard. So the question is, are we willing to embrace the faith of the Bible, the kind that walks through fire, that holds on in suffering, that trusts even in the silence? Or have we become too afraid of hardship to experience the depth of what true faith really is? The turning point is when faith becomes more than just words. Faith is easy to speak about, but difficult to live out. It is one thing to say we believe in Jesus, to attend church, to pray when life is going well. But faith is not proven in words, it is proven in action, in the moments when belief costs something, when trusting God requires letting go of control. The chosen captures this turning point, the moment when following Jesus stops being an idea and becomes a decision that shapes everything. Peter faced this moment when Jesus called him to step out of the boat. It was one thing to believe Jesus could perform miracles when watching from the shore, but now Peter was being asked to put his belief into action. For a moment he did. He walked on water, defying everything logic told him was possible. But then reality set in. The waves rose, the wind howled, and in that split second faith gave way to fear. He began to sink, and in his desperation he cried out, "Lord, save me!" That was the moment his faith became real. Not because he walked on water, but because when he fell, he reached for Jesus. That is what faith looks like, not perfect strength, but trust in the one who lifts us when we fall. Mary Magdalene had her turning point when she relapsed into the very darkness she had been freed from. She had walked with Jesus, had been rescued from her past, had experienced a new life. But the enemy knows how to use our past against us. When she fell back into shame, she believed she was too broken to return. But Jesus did not see her failure as the end. He saw it as part of her journey. And when he found her, he did not scold her. He did not reject her. He called her back. Her faith became real, not in the moment of her salvation, but in the moment she chose to return, even after she had fallen. Matthew's turning point was not dramatic, but it was just as powerful. He had always been an observer, someone who analyzed everything, someone who calculated risks before making decisions. But when Jesus called him, there was no time to calculate, no time to weigh the options. He had to leave his tax booth, his wealth, his security, without hesitation. And he did. That was the moment his faith became real. Not when he understood everything, but when he obeyed without knowing where the road would lead. Thomas had his moment in the most unexpected way. He doubted. He hesitated. He wanted proof. But when Jesus appeared to him after the resurrection, when he showed Thomas his scars, something changed. His doubt did not disqualify him. It led him to one of the most profound confessions in all of Scripture. "My Lord and my God." Faith is not the absence of questions. It is choosing to believe even when the questions remain. James and John had their moment when they realized that greatness in God's kingdom was not about power, but about humility. They had sought high positions, imagining themselves as rulers beside Jesus. But when he spoke of suffering, of servanthood, of laying down one's life, they had to decide. Did they want the kingdom as they imagined it, or were they willing to follow Jesus even when it meant taking up a cross? Every follower of Jesus reaches this point, the moment when faith is no longer just an idea, but something that requires action, something that costs something. That moment might come in suffering, when trusting God means holding on even when nothing makes sense. It might come in failure, when we must choose whether to return to Him or let shame drive us away. It might come in obedience, when we are asked to follow even when the road ahead is uncertain. The chosen shows us that faith is not built in comfort. It is built in decisions. The moment when Peter reached for Jesus instead of drowning. The moment when Mary walked back instead of running away. The moment when Matthew left everything behind. The moment when Thomas declared what his heart had always feared to believe. The turning point of faith is not about feeling ready. It is not about understanding everything. It is about stepping forward, even when it is hard, because that is the difference between those who hear Jesus' words and those who truly follow Him. So the question is, have you had your turning point? And if not, when that moment comes, will you be ready to choose faith, even when it costs you everything? If Jesus didn't give up on them, why would He give up on you? One of the greatest lies the enemy whispers to believers is that we are too far gone, too broken, too full of failure for God to continue working in us. We convince ourselves that our mistakes have disqualified us, that our struggles are proof we are not strong enough, that our doubts make us unworthy. But the chosen shatters this illusion by showing us one undeniable truth. Jesus never gave up on the ones He called, and if He didn't give up on them, He will not give up on you. Peter denied Jesus 3 times. He wasn't just afraid, he outright rejected the one he had sworn to follow. After everything he had seen, after all the miracles, after walking on water, after promising to stand by Jesus no matter what, in the moment of pressure, he failed. And in his shame, he ran. He returned to his old life, to fishing, believing he had lost his place. But Jesus came to find him. He met him at the shore, not with anger, not with punishment, but with a simple question: do you love me? 3 times, Jesus gave Peter the chance to replace his denials with devotion. 3 times, he restored what was broken. Peter's failure was not the end of his story. It was the moment his calling became unshakable. Mary Magdalene fell back into the darkness she thought she had escaped. After being freed, after walking with Jesus, after experiencing grace firsthand, she still doubted her own worth. She listened to the voices that told her she would never change, that she was still the same lost soul she had always been. And for a moment, she believed it. She ran. She hid. But Jesus pursued her. He called her back, proving that grace is not a one-time event, but an unbreakable promise. Her relapse did not remove his love. Her failure did not cancel his calling. Matthew was an outcast long before he followed Jesus. He was rejected by his people, despised for his past, and even among the disciples, he struggled to belong. There were moments when he must have wondered if he had made the right choice. Was he truly meant to be here? Did Jesus really want him? The others were fishermen, strong and skilled in a way he was not. But Jesus never saw Matthew as an outsider. He saw him as chosen. And the very things that made Matthew different, his attention to detail, his ability to record, his perspective, were the things God used to write the gospel that would be read for generations. Thomas doubted, but Jesus didn't condemn him. James and John sought power, but Jesus didn't reject them. Every disciple had a weakness, a moment of failure, a season of struggle. Yet not once did Jesus turn them away. He did not give up on them because he does not choose people based on their perfection. He chooses them based on his love. How often do we convince ourselves that we are different, that our mistakes are too big, our struggles too deep, our failures too frequent? But the same Jesus who restored Peter, who called Mary by name, who welcomed Matthew into his inner circle, is the same Jesus who looks at you and says, I am not finished with you yet. We are not called because we are worthy. We are called because he is merciful. We are not used because we are strong. We are used because his power is made perfect in our weakness. If Jesus didn't give up on them, why would he give up on you? So the real question is not whether he will continue walking with you. The question is, will you believe he still can? Will you let go of the shame that tells you you are too broken? Will you silence the fear that says you have failed too many times? Because the truth is, the only person standing between you and God's plan for your life is you. He is still calling you. He is still pursuing you. The only thing left is whether you will believe he is exactly who he says he is, the God who never gives up on his own. Faith isn't perfect. That means it's meant to be tested. Faith is often misunderstood. We think of it as something we are supposed to master, something that should grow stronger without struggle, without failure, without questions. But the chosen reveals what the Bible has shown us from the beginning. Faith was never meant to be perfect. It was meant to be tested, because real faith is not found in the absence of trials, but in enduring through them. Peter's faith was tested the moment he stepped onto the water. As long as his eyes were fixed on Jesus, he walked in the impossible. But the moment he focused on the storm, fear gripped him and he sank. Many would see that as failure. But what if that moment was exactly what Peter needed? What if sinking was part of the process, because it was in his failure that he learned something deeper? Faith is not about being strong enough to walk on water. It is about knowing who to cry out to when you start to sink. Mary Magdalene's faith was tested when she fell back into old fears. She had been freed, yet she still felt the weight of her past. The temptation to believe she was unworthy, that she was beyond grace, pulled her into despair. But that moment was not the end of her story. It was part of her refining, because it was in that moment of weakness that she learned something she had never truly understood. God's love does not waver when we fall. His grace does not disappear when we struggle. Faith is not proven in never stumbling. It is proven in coming back. Matthew's faith was tested in a different way. He had left everything to follow Jesus. But following did not mean instant belonging. The other disciples were slow to accept him. The road was uncertain. His past as a tax collector made him an outsider. But God does not call us to faith that is comfortable. He calls us to faith that is stretched. Matthew had to believe in his place among the disciples before anyone else did. He had to trust that Jesus had chosen him for a reason, even when others doubted him. And in that testing, his faith became stronger. Thomas's faith was tested when Jesus died. He had given everything to follow him, had believed he was the Messiah, had seen the miracles with his own eyes. But then Jesus was gone. And in that moment, faith felt like a risk too great to take. Doubt was easier, questions felt safer. And yet, when Jesus stood before him again, showing his scars, Thomas's faith was not destroyed by doubt. It was solidified by it. Because faith is not the absence of questions. It is choosing to believe even after walking through them. James and John had their faith tested in their expectations. They believed following Jesus would lead to power, to glory, to a place of honor in his kingdom. But Jesus shattered those illusions. He told them the greatest would be the least, the first would be last, that the road ahead was not one of status, but of sacrifice. And they had to decide, was their faith in what they wanted Jesus to be, or in who he truly was? The greatest mistake we make is thinking that struggling with faith means we are failing in faith. But what if the struggle is part of the process? What if the trials, the storms, the moments of doubt are not signs that we are weak, but signs that we are growing? The disciples were not strong because they never wavered. They were strong because after every test, they still chose to follow. And that is the truth the chosen brings to light. That faith is not about never questioning, never failing, never struggling. It is about what happens after. It is about getting back up. It is about trusting even when you do not understand. It is about believing that God is still in control, even when nothing makes sense. So if you feel like your faith is being tested, do not mistake it for weakness. It is not a sign that you are failing. It is a sign that God is shaping you, refining you, preparing you for something deeper. Because faith is not meant to be perfect. It is meant to be tested. The question is, will you endure the test? Will you hold on even when the storm rages? Will you trust even when doubt creeps in? Because the ones who do are the ones who discover what real faith truly is. Your struggle is proof that God is working. Everything in us wants to believe that faith should be easy, that following Jesus should bring instant clarity, that if we truly trusted him, we wouldn't struggle so much. But The Chosen shows us something different. It reveals a truth we often overlook. The struggle itself is evidence that God is working. The battle you are facing is not a sign that you are failing. It is proof that your faith is alive, that God is refining you, that something greater is being built within you. Peter didn't become the rock of the church because he was always strong. He became the rock because he was willing to be broken. His struggles, his impulsiveness, his pride, his failures were not the things that disqualified him. They were the very things God used to shape him into the leader he was meant to be. Every storm he faced, every mistake he made, every moment of weakness prepared him for what was coming. His struggle was not pointless. It was proof that God was molding him for something bigger than he could see. Mary Magdalene was not defined by her past. Her greatest battle was not against the demons that had once possessed her, but against the shame that tried to pull her back. She struggled, not because she was unworthy, but because she was still learning what grace truly meant. And every time she fell, every time she questioned, every time she doubted, Jesus reminded her his love was greater than her worst moments. Her struggle was not proof of her failure. It was proof of her transformation. Matthew's journey was marked by rejection. He left behind wealth, comfort, and security, but even among the disciples, he still felt like an outsider. He wrestled with belonging, with whether he truly had a place among those who had known Jesus before him. But that struggle was the very thing that made his calling undeniable. The one who had once been an outcast was chosen to write the gospel that would bring millions into the family of God. His struggle was not proof that he was in the wrong place. It was proof that God had placed him exactly where he needed to be. Thomas's doubt was never about rebellion. It was about wanting to be sure. He struggled because he cared. He asked for proof because he longed to believe, and Jesus did not reject him for it. Instead, he met him in his doubt, showing him his scars, proving that real faith is not about never questioning, but about seeking truth, even when it feels hard to find. Thomas's struggle was not a weakness. It was the path to a deeper, unshakable faith. James and John struggled with their own expectations. They wanted greatness, power, recognition. But Jesus showed them that true greatness comes through sacrifice, that real strength is found in humility. Their struggle was not a mistake. It was a necessary breaking of pride, so they could become the men God had called them to be. The same is true for you. The battle you are facing right now is not proof that God has abandoned you. It is proof that He is refining you. Every moment of doubt, every fear, every unanswered prayer, every setback, it is all part of the process, because God does not build strong faith in comfort. He builds it in the fire. So do not mistake the struggle for absence. Do not believe the lie that your battle means you are alone. Look at the ones who came before you. Every disciple struggled. Every believer who has ever walked this road has faced the same doubts, the same fears, the same pain. But those who endured, those who held on, those who refused to give up, they discovered something life-changing. The struggle was never meant to destroy them. It was meant to prepare them. If The Chosen teaches us anything, it is this: faith was never meant to be easy. But it was always meant to be worth it. Your struggle is not proof that you are lost. It is proof that you are growing, that God is working, that He is shaping you into something far greater than you can see right now. The only question left is this: will you hold on? Will you trust even when the road is difficult? Will you believe that even in the struggle, God is still with you, still for you, still working all things together for your good? Because if you do, you will come out on the other side with a faith that cannot be shaken. And one day, you will look back on this season, on this struggle, and realize it was never meant to break you. It was meant to build you. This is the faith that changes everything, the faith that cannot be stolen, the faith that endures, and it is the faith that Jesus is calling you to today.